So this is going to be part one of a three-part podcast deep dive we're going to do into the life and death of Eamon Kelly. He comes up so much. He ended his life as the Capo de Capi of gangland, the mentor to many. But he'd an interesting career himself. And we're going to look at that from the start of him emerging as a criminal from Dublin's North Inner City. In the 60s, really. He's born in 1947.
Yeah, he's born in 1947 in the North Inner City, was certainly raised for a period of time in Ruthless Street. And if you look back to that time, like, he's actually born into an era where there is no organised crime in Ireland. I mean, there is crime, there's people robbing and, doing all sorts of criminal activity, but organised crime doesn't exist. World War II has just ended. There's rationing, and what had been the IRA had more or less ceased to exist in any meaningful way. There'd been people interned as part of the war effort, a lot of people locked up. But Eamon Kelly comes from that background, and he's raised in the 50s. He's raised in an IRA house,
And he's probably, that is what really brings him on the radar of the Gardaí. It's always said he's been on their radar since he was a sort of a teenager.
Well, in fact, his first conviction is at the age of 6, believe it or not, for robbery. So he comes from a big family. His father was, very much a Republican. They were very close friends with a guy called Sean Garland, who would go on to lead the official IRA. He would have been a family friend. But Eamon and his brother Matt were tearaway teens. They were getting in trouble. I think Eamon Kelly did serve some prison sentence as a juvenile. So they were part of this first wave. When you get into the 1960s, when they're in their teenage years, you have this, in the 50s, the IRA fought this, what's called the border campaign, where they, through the 50s, they robbed a load of arms. They carried out a load of attacks in the north, rejuvenated the IRA, and a lot of that was from people based in Dublin, left-leaning IRA volunteers. And Eamon Kelly is around all of these people growing up. That goes on.
It's not clear whether he actually joins, but it is sort of reported that he joins the IRA.
Well, it's reported, and it's constantly been said that he is an IRA member. Now, the people that have researched this, for example, in the book The Lost Revolution, would say he was never an IRA member. But what happens through the 60s is that there's a load of these subversive criminal groupings, groups like Sarah, and others, where it's not clear whether they're in the IRA or not, and they certainly, when they're carrying out their crimes, are they're robbing banks and they're mentioning Republican ideals. So Eamon Kelly falls into all of that era. So in the 1960s, and it's mentioned in Paul Williams' book, Bad Fellas, there's this report done up by a police officer who says, I can't remember the exact terms, but he says there's no organised crime groups operating in Ireland. And it's not that he's delusional, there just really isn't. But that all rapidly changes between 1967 and the early 70s. And I think the statistics used is there's one armed robbery carried out in 1967. By 1976, there's 249 or something. So you're talking about this explosion of armed robbery. Just like we had an explosion of cocaine in our era where there's one or two seizures and all of a sudden then there's thousands.
Yeah.
So Eamon Kelly is a teenager at this stage. He's drinking in these Republican clubs. The troubles are just beginning. And once the troubles begin, chaos breaks out, really. And it sparks this secondary wave of armed robberies, really, because the state become focused on the IRA and the threat of...
You're into the 70s?
Well, you're into the early 70s now. So at that point, Eamon Kelly and his brother Matt are already regarded as being hardened criminals. And there's a report written sometime in the early 70s who describes what Eamon Kelly's role is at that stage in the criminal underworld. It says he has a reputation for ruthlessness, and is a cunning and vicious individual. He has something of a godfather status in the criminal underworld, and he conducts his interests through intimidation and the use of fear, basically. So even at this stage...
And he's a teenager, not yet a man. He's sort of coming up to being...
Well, he probably is a man at that stage, because we all...
This is late 70s then, this report is coming
he's born in 1947,
Yeah.
so you're talking even, he's 20 in 1967, and then... So he's into his 20s, and these are now hardened criminals. But a lot of what they're operating is a kind of crime that sort of disappeared in this country. So what started happening in the North Inner City was racketeering, which was protection money, basically, that they were going around intimidating local businesses. They'd have to be paid protection money, or else then there'd be a risk of armed robbery. But there's also this explosion of armed robberies across the country. In order to have armed robberies, you have to have weapons. And that's where Eamon Kelly's connection with the official IRA. Now, the official IRA, that's split with the provisional IRA in the early part of the 70s. They had a very strong base in the south. They declared a ceasefire in 1972. They wanted a socialist republic. They didn't want to fight a sectarian war in the north. The provos really, within a short space of time, became the dominant force in the north. But there were still these old official IRA guys in the south. They started to move towards politics, but they needed the funding. And while they conducted their own robberies, they also sponsored these criminals. And Eamon Kelly knew these people all his life. I mean, he knew them from day one. So there's a report describing really what he was doing, that the official IRA would give Kelly weapons, and he would also give them information, and they conduct robberies on his behalf. It says much of Dublin's Group B, which was the official IRA armed robbery wing, activity increasingly focused on providing information and logistical support for criminal networks, particularly the group headed by Eamon and Matt Kelly. And by the time in the early 80s, the Kellys had gathered around them a group of young criminals drawn from Dublin's North Inner City. Some of the young men were sympathetic to the cause, but the primary reason for their alliance was the percentage of proceeds they received from joint activity. So
they were getting information, logistical support, weapons, and probably, if they needed extra men, they might have been provided, getaway drivers, etc.
Well, sometimes the official IRA would plant somebody on the robbery crew to make sure they
weren't pocketing.
Make sure they weren't pocketing, make sure they were handing up the percentage. They give them the arms. They also had these contacts maybe in amongst workers who tell them, because a lot of these armed robberies weren't banks. We always think back to the banks, and the banks are the big halls. But a lot of them were wages, people getting paid wages, for example. Every Friday, I sort of vaguely remember it myself, people would get a little envelope with their wages. So a lot of those were those type of robberies, and they were very big hauls at the time. So that's what Eamon Kelly was doing. But also what he was doing was he was going around protection money, and he was using the official IRA's name in that protection money scheme. And that caused a lot of controversy over the years. Now, as you get into the 80s, like all of these guys, they want to take a bit of a backseat. And what he starts doing is getting these other younger criminals from the North Inner City, including Gerard Hutch in particular. Now, he'd known the Hutch family, Kelly, for a long, long time. John Hutch, Jerry's older brother, who passed away a couple of years ago, he had worked for Eamon Kelly in his carpet business, because Eamon and Matt Kelly had also set up a carpet business at this time. So he had these people working for him, and he would provide them with weaponry and take a cut. And that is really... But Hutch, I suppose, they really spotted, Eamon Kelly in particular, spotted something in Gerard Hutch that separated him from the rest of those guys who were kind of reckless and dangerous people. And Hutch quickly, even as a very young man, became, a very, very respected figure in that Kelly gang. They were certainly close people. And I suppose there's one...
he probably spotted a bit of himself in him, in a way, because I suppose Jerry Hutch as a very young kid, teenager, became a leader.
He became a
He
leader.
had those qualities that he was the boss and everybody did as he said. And, there was a clever cunning there too.
There was a cunning, but also, yes, exactly. Cleverness, I think, was the most important bit, because if you look back at some of those people, some of those ex-Bugsy Malone guys, and I read up a bit for this, and you see them, there's loads of them keep getting caught. There's shootouts with police. There's all sorts of chaotic, crazy action. But Gerard Hutch is a different matter. And the Kellys are much older, a good bit older. Like, they don't want that. They don't need that. They're running this legitimate business. They have this loads of sources of income. And Gerard Hutch looks like the perfect man. Now, there's one infamous case, I suppose, that shows you a kind of where the two of them are together. It's in 1982, there's a robbery from an AIB branch in Drumcondra. A load of money is taken. It's divided up. $6,000 is given to one individual living in Crumlin. He hides it in a garden. A couple of young fellas find it. Basically, spend the money, right? Now, so it becomes clear what's happened. The person is tracked down, and what happens next is there's a lot of reports of this at the time, and in police reports, Jerry Hutch and Eamon Kelly call out to this teenager, and it's reported that they call him, tell him, we need this money to be paid up. Eamon Kelly is with Gerard Hutch. Hutch allegedly threatens him, though he would, I think, dispute some of that. It's said that Eamon Kelly shows the teenager a gun that he's in his waistband, and he's given time to pay up. Something goes wrong. The money doesn't get paid up, and later on, a shot is fired through a house in Crumlin, and a teenager, 15-year-old brother of the individual, is killed. It's one of the first, and a really shocking gun murder at the time. Hutch and Kelly are not suspected of being gunmen at all. The gunmen ultimately would be convicted. However, they're in. That's the sort of criminal activity they're suspected of being involved in. The planning of these raids, also this using their fearsome reputation.
And there you have the threat that becomes the reality.
Yeah.
So the money, they need it back.
Yeah.
But they don't only need it back for the cash, they need it back for the power.
Yes.
Because they cannot be seen to ever leave anything like that go.
Yeah.
They make a threat, they give somebody an opportunity to come up with the money, something goes wrong, and the shot is fired.
Yes.
There's a big difference between people going around just threatening and not carrying through with what they say. That puts them on a different level then.
And it does. And the next time they would be questioned, which is shortly after about a murder, is the murder of a guy called Danny McCone. Now, Danny McCone, very like Kelly, he's reported as being a member of the INLA. And he certainly was involved at the INLA. But are these guys INLA guys? He was a mix-up in Sarah Era. They're robbing banks. Like, what are they? And this is the reality of, we think it's really clear-cut they're INLA or not, but these guys are floating along and working together. Anyway, he's a very close pal of Tommy the Zombie Savage, and he gets in a dispute with Gerard Hutch, a personal dispute. And in 1982, despite being a wealthy guy living in Meath with a lovely house, Danny McCone, he continues to drive in to the North Inner City to collect his dole every week. And as he's shot outside the dole office, and Hutch and Kelly are both questioned about it. As far as I know, they both deny it then, and maybe continue to do in Gerard Hutch's case. But when Kelly is arrested, or questioned anyway, he says, well, I wasn't there. What about his movements? Because he's down in the forecourts, he said, meeting with his lawyer, which is, So that came after a big dispute where Kelly had arranged a sit down with Hutch and with people like the Zombie Savage and McCone, who was a very, very serious criminal. But I suppose it shows you at that stage that Hutch was just a very young man, but was still not willing to back down. And that shows also how seriously he is taken at that point. What's going on for the Kelly brothers at this point is that they've been running this carpet business in Phibsborough. And the state, they go into liquidation, and they're now being held personally responsible for the deaths. And in the middle of this process, the carpet business burns down. It's on the North Circular Road. I actually remember this because I remember, so it's 1982, so I must have been 6 or 7. And I remember, because I only lived down the road, I remember walking down my dad. I mean, it was an incredible blaze.
Right.
Just a few hundred meters, just shortly away from our house, walking down my dad, sitting on my dad's shoulders. And this incredible, it was a huge...
It was still on fire when you went down to see it?
Still on fire, and there was a huge crowd of people, as people do in Ireland.
Yeah, yes.
Probably entertainment was even lesser back in the 1980s. But I remember sitting on his shoulders and watching this burn down. And I remember, even then, people saying, this is very dodgy, right? And everybody was saying it. So what happens is that it goes into the liquidation proceedings occur, and they're looking, the whole Matt and Eamon Kelly were personally liable for all of this stuff.
Are they questioned in relation to any sort of suggestion of arson?
Well, look, there's suggestion of arson, but what happens as these proceedings begin is there's a chief liquidator for the state. The morning he's due to give evidence, there's an arson attack on him. There is a former accountant who'd been worked for the Kellys. He receives threats. He was put under armed protection for many, many years. And ultimately, Matt Kelly would go to prison for contempt of court for what happened in those proceedings. He ends up being bankrupt, and they're hit with these bills. But it causes a huge fuss because it was right around the time when Martin Cahill had attacked
Jim Donovan. I was just going to say that. Martin Cahill was up to exactly the same activities.
Yes.
He was sort of fighting against the pillars of the state while he was mowing his way through this, world of organised crime. He was robbing fine art. He was robbing jewellery shops. He had a big name for himself, and he was a big focus of the Gardaí. But he often would show up in a police station, for example, if something was happening, to give himself an exact alibi. Often down in the courts, he would make a big scene so as everybody would know he was there. And of course, he did put a bomb in the forensic scientist Jim Donovan's car, who was due to give evidence at a case against him.
Yeah, now Martin Cahill went to war with the state in a way far greater than the Kellys did, as you described. But it's interesting that at that point, or shortly before, it's described there's 3 main criminal organisations. We go back to the 60s, there's none. But at this point, there's 3 main criminal organisations in the city.
So it's the Generals, the Duns who are peddling heroin.
Yes.
Into largely, in particular, the North Inner City is very badly hit by it. There's a lot of attention focused at this point by politicians and locals on the drug dealers.
Yes.
The Concerned Parents Against Drugs are up and running. They're marching on homes of identified drug dealers. They're placing, coffins and stuff outside their houses. They're trying to run them out of the communities. So there's a lot of focus and attention going on to that.
There is. And the third thing are the Kellys. And they are really, at this point, they're not involved majorly in the drugs trade, though some of their associates are, like Tommy Savage, who are starting to move in that direction. But they are, they are regarded as the third major criminal organisation in the country. They have, and it's said in all those reports how their access to weaponry really puts them in another in another
realm.
Yeah,
I mean they're proving that they are very organised. They have legitimate companies hiding their funds, their money laundering.
Yeah,
in an extremely sophisticated way for those times. They have the connections with the IRA, with the weapons. They are mentoring younger criminals who are coming up, and they're showing this skill of, while they're very violent, they seem to be controlled.
Yes.
And of course, it's not always like that, is it?
No, it's not. And while we talk about Matt, who was 4 years older than Eamon, it seems to be that Eamon is the one with a much greater propensity for violence.
He definitely has a hot temper because So, you know, he's seen as those things, as clever as a career criminal, and using those companies as a front for his activities is hugely sophisticated. But he is also somebody who can lose the head.
Yes.
And there's an incident at the Old Workers Club on Gardner Street in 1984 where it was described at the time, and has been since, this sort of simple political debate got out of hand and very heated. And Kelly got so annoyed that he took a knife and stabbed a 21-year-old almost to death in that incident. Now, he was brought to court and he was convicted, and he got a 10-year sentence for the attack. And that was really the first lengthy term behind bars that he would receive. But he had this kind of ability to rage against the system as well as other human beings. And he took it upon himself to challenge the justice system and that conviction that had sort of, he saw it as he had been taken away from his family by the state and he had been locked up. There was no connection that, right, you almost killed a guy with a knife. He could not get his head around that at all. This was the state doing him down, doing him bad. So he actually took a sort of a judicial process with it. And he ended up actually getting a retrial ordered. So the next time he goes into the system in connection with this attack, where he was almost knifed this 21-year-old to death, he's found guilty of assault, which is a far lesser charge than the original. And he gets a 3-year sentence. So he knocks the 10-year sentence down to 3. And he goes in to prison. He
goes into prison, and it's two things happen as a result of that. Because this was a Republican club where many official IRA members would have drank, it's a breaking point for that relationship. The man stabbed is a member of the Workers' Party, very young man, highly regarded, and the Republican movement are not happy with Kelly. And also, it also becomes something that is, the Workers' Party, who ultimately go on to have a lot of representatives in the Dáil over time. It's something that's used against them as well, the Kelly's involvement in that. So he goes into prison, and certainly those older links now are effectively at an end. But it's never as simple as that, because as you can see over time, these paramilitary and criminal figures, they just keep interacting as they go along. But it's a bit of a watershed moment for him, for sure.
So he's in jail and he is doing his thing. He's identifying, again, younger criminals he believes are going to be very successful. On that point, so Hutch is himself, he's not working essentially for Kelly, he's doing his own thing as well. So this sort of mentoring, which starts really in at this point in Kelly's life, does he sort of charge for this service? Is he getting a cut of the robberies that are going on? Is he doing what the official IRA did for him, providing the logistics, providing the information, sometimes the intel, providing the plan, maybe the idea around the plan and how to go about things? And is this becoming another arm to his business?
Well, I think that was what it was like. And that's how the Kellys basically sponsored these young guys and got them going. The weaponry was definitely a big thing, but they were also involved in providing cars for other criminal gangs, stolen cars. They would obviously get younger lads to rob those cars. There was a lot. They were also heavily involved in kind of other ways of making money that we probably don't hear so much about. But for example, insurance fraud. Eamon Kelly would have been involved in all of those sort of schemes. So, the actual bit of crime, the actual bit of grabbing a big load of money out of a bank, that's only one stage of it. Even back then, there's money to be made from all the other bits. So he was involved in all of those bits. Now, as you get to the end of the 80s and he comes out of prison, Hutch really is not working for those guys anymore at all. He is the head of his own organisation. Obviously, in the 80s and in the 90s, he is linked to a couple a couple of record armed robberies, really, that we've spoken about before, and he continues to say there's no proof of his involvement. But nonetheless, everybody links him to those robberies, and he becomes far more famous than the Kellys ever were, or in the public eye. And there's loads of money from those bank raids. Not to go back into it, but that money goes through CAB. There's huge investigations into different bank accounts, different amounts of money coming in the aftermath of those raids, all connected with Gerard Hutch. And the Criminal Assets Bureau was ultimately set up after Veronica Guerin's murder in 1996. So that's all a quick sweep through the 90s.
But Kelly's coming out in the late sort of 80s out of prison from serving this sentence. And really the focus of policing in the 1980s was this heroin crisis in Dublin. And you had the likes of Tony King Scum Faloney, Thomas the Boxer Mullen, Larry Dunn. There was a lot of targeting on those organisations and those individuals. And of course you had Cahill, who was, robbing gold and diamonds and prices.
Yeah, and making loads of noise and
becoming making a show of the police, really. They look like Keystone Cops when it comes to him. So the resources of the state, which are small, and we know really in the 1980s that even the kind of the young first drugs unit has a handful of people working for it.
Yes.
They're very, very stretched.
Absolutely.
And of course, the Tango Squad is placed on the General on a permanent basis.
And that's not even to mention Shergar and all those, the kidnappings. And all of those. So all of that takes up a huge amount of the state's attention. But in the background, in the late 80s, there's a couple of smarter criminals that are continuing to operate. And Matt Kelly would be absolutely one of them. Matt Kelly would be, remain close to Gerard Hutch, remain close to his brother Eamon Kelly. And they are moving on to the next level, I would say.
And there's also a situation that people are anti-heroin.
Yeah.
It's the drug that is seen as destroying the communities, killing the young people and, causing such chaos. But there's other drugs knocking around as well. There's cannabis.
Yeah.
And, there is an attitude that, that's not so bad. And also cocaine is beginning to look a little bit promising. It's still the drug of the rich, but nonetheless, it's there. It's, if you were an entrepreneurial criminal, you might be looking at that and thinking, right, that has potential. And of course, Eamon Kelly starts to throw an eye over that. That film Scarface really only increased the popularity of cocaine.
Oh, totally.
Despite the violence in it.
So in the 80s, you had some of these ex-paramilitary guys. They all start moving into the drugs trade. There's Tommy Savage goes into the cannabis, becomes one of the biggest cannabis dealers in the country. You have other contemporaries of the Kellys, like the Dunns, obviously move into heroin. But all the while, cocaine is not really a feature in the Irish market. There's tiny amounts of seizures, but the world has changed.
Yeah, and Ireland is changing too. It's slowly shaking off the chains of poverty. And you have got this middle class set that are socialising together in nightclubs and restaurants. They have money in their pocket. They're sort of the movers and shakers of Irish society. You've got like White's on the Green, the Mirabeau restaurant in Dunleary, Berkeley Court Hotel. These are the kind of places these people are mixing. And they're partying into the night, drinking expensive wine, and they're taking cocaine. Yeah. And Kelly sort of reasoned that, there could be a solid customer base for this drug. It wasn't as bad as heroin, and maybe, of course, we have that whole situation with the IRA not liking drugs and coming out so strongly against them. So these guys that have connections with the IRA, the official or the provos, use them for weaponry and other things. They don't really want to annoy them. So he starts to look at cocaine. And of course, there is one place in the world to go for cocaine at that time, and that's Miami.
Yeah,
Florida.
Miami is it's boom time in Miami.
Yeah, absolute. So there's an Irish guy actually out in Miami at this time, a guy called John Francis Conlon. And he appears to know all the right people and is the go-to guy there to be introduced to the dealer selling high quality coke. Now this is going for $20,000 per kilo at this stage.
Right, which is more or less what it would cost now. So it's a huge amount of money to be made in cocaine back then.
And for that kilo, you're buying it in Miami for $20,000. It is enough if you get it into Ireland to make yourself around £500,000. You're talking back then, right? When it's cut and bulked, because of course it's not in high quality at that point. So, Miami is this playground of the rich. Obviously, Pablo Escobar has his tentacles everywhere there. But you also have this very impoverished immigrant community. So you have people that are willing to probably carry the cocaine for you on flights, boats, whatever they're doing. So there's no shortage of those willing to take a risk for for a payday.
Yeah, the mule smuggling is, certainly when cocaine first starts getting moved to Europe, there's no shipping containers, there's no flights being brought over. So it's done either by mule smuggling or in the post. And the mule smuggling is obviously the most reliable, where people strap cocaine or swallow it, which is much more risky. But basically strap it to their body and walk through customs. And, this is the preferred method. And this is what Eamon Kelly seizes upon.
So, and I suppose that's a good place to kind of end the first part of the story of the life and the death of Eamon Kelly. We have him eyeing up a new cocaine route into Ireland. We have his contact, John Francis Conlon, living out in Miami and being able to give him the introduction to the people he needs to make. We have him going out to Miami to start this process of, can he bring cocaine in? He was unfortunate though, because what he didn't know was that Conlon was actually double jobbing for the DEA, and the DEA are trying to penetrate the Pablo Escobar cartel. So he doesn't know that, and he also doesn't know that the Gardaí have been tipped off that this, major target of their operations is attempting to set up this new route.
Yeah.
I'm Nicola Tallant, and you're watching Crime World, a podcast about criminals, drugs and the underworld in Ireland and across the globe. Make sure you subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you can be the first to watch all our latest episodes. You can also listen wherever you get your podcasts.